You mentioned Billy Taylor, who you had a long-standing relationship with, and also Keith Jarrett, who you've been working with lately. Who are some of the jazz artists that you've worked with over the years?
All right. Well, I hesitate to mention my client roster because I always forget some people. But there was Billy, of course, and there's the Thelonious Monk Estate, which is probably the most successful of my artists in terms of music publishing. Ron Carter, Jack DeJohnette, Ahmad Jamal, and then some people who are not so well known, but like Joe Locke and Russell Malone, Benny Green, Cedar Walton, who was a great pianist who we just lost recently, was a perfect example of a jazz artist who was a composer, and his music publishing continues to generate substantial income now for his estate because of two things. Cedar over the years has made many albums, many of which were made in Europe. So the albums continue to sell, and they continue to be performed. Basically, there are two types of income generated from a recording. One is sales of the records, and two is performances of the records on the air, which generate what's called performing rights income, which in the United States is payable by two societies, ASCAP and BMI. And each country of the world has their own performing rights society, PRS in the UK, SACEM in France, AGEMA in Germany, et cetera, all around the world. And what I do for many of my clients is I administer their music publishing. In other words, the royalties collected from the sales of records and the royalties collected from performances of the records on the air and live performances of those jazz artists in those countries are collected by a publisher, or we call them a sub-publisher, because it's a licensee publisher, in each country of the world. And every year, about this time, I go to France to something called MIDEM, M-I-D-E-M, which is a convention. Basically, I call it the Cannes Film Festival with music, which in fact it is. It's the same place, many of the same guys. And we meet all our international music publishers, and we discuss what's happened through the year. We give them some new material. Maybe we make some changes from time to time. And that's the whole area of international music publishing.
Okay, well, I got a question here. Someone tweeted a question. We were speaking about Keith Jarrett. You mentioned that Keith has not recorded any original compositions sometime. Viewer says, is Keith difficult to work with? So I guess let's make that a broader question. Are musicians different than any other type of client?
Of course not. They have mortgages, they have families, they have dogs, they have cars, whatever. Then there are some crazies too. Essentially, my long-standing clients, Ron Carter and Jack DeJohnette and the Monks and many Cedar Walton and whatever are good people, good business people. Who happen to be very talented also. Keith is eccentric, but Keith has a manager, Steve Cloud, who nothing can faze. He can deal with anything, and so Keith's business is handled very, very well, and Keith can run his life the way he wants to. Frankly, I've met Keith, half a dozen times, just casually. As is the case with many big stars, you don't deal directly with them. You deal with the people who represent them, their managers or their accountants or their lawyers. Plenty of people call me on behalf of my clients, and I deal with them. For Keith, I Of course, I don't handle music publishing because he for the last 30 years recorded only standards. Although he does have solo concerts which are pure improvisation, and those are original compositions too. So we have a bit of a publishing business for him. But for the most part, for Keith, what I do is chase things on the internet. Keith is very proprietary as far as his recordings are concerned. He does not want to allow any of his live recordings. I mean, there are recordings all over the internet because where people have gone to perform, and I've had many cases of this. You go to Sweden to do a concert, and the Swedish radio wants to make a copy for, quote, archive purposes, close quote, and you allow them to do that, even though your contract says in 5 different ways on 10 different pages, this can only be used for archive purposes, can't be used at all, and by the time you get home, it's already in Dakins in the village, so that those recordings float around, especially with Monk. There are many of those things. Some of them are videos, and they get released. And so for Keith, there's something called Wolfgang's Vault, and I don't mind talking about them because I think that they're basically reprehensible. They have the attitude that it basically comes out of the Bill Graham archives. Bill Graham was a legendary rock producer from San Francisco. Again, recorded all of this stuff at the time. Has these archives purchased the archives of George Wein from the Newport Jazz Festival. George Wein is a very reputable person, always has been, always will be. And he told the purchaser of his archives, look, I have no rights in this stuff, and you can't use it. Well, they proceeded to then totally ignore that and use it. And they put all this stuff up on their website, Wolfgang's Vault, and they have the position that, well, 10% of the people are going to complain, so we'll make deals with them. So I'm one of those 10%, and I've made deals with them on behalf of Cedar, on behalf of Monk, and especially on behalf of Keith and Ahmad Jamal. I don't know whether I mentioned Ahmad before. I just spoke to him yesterday. And so that's what I do a lot with these people is police things used on the internet. There are ways to do that involving some of the provisions of the copyright law. Certainly the 2 biggest offenders, if you will, are iTunes and Amazon. And, of course, they have huge legal departments. And if you write them letters, it's called a takedown letter, in most cases they will remove the offending product. But we just had a recent case with Keith and some guy actually performing one of Keith's solo piano concerts. He transcribed the record, I guess, and he played it on the piano. And this was a very respectful thing to do. He's doing it out of, because he admires Keith Jarrett. Well, Keith doesn't want anybody admiring him that way. Those things are recorded by Keith, and they have remained the way they are. So we had to go and chase this guy on the internet, and we do. We get it removed. So that's a long answer to your question of whether Keith is unusual.
Challenging to work with. Well, it's a good answer because the fact that you are able to take down these unauthorized recordings and performances is a positive thing for musicians who want to do that.